What do you notice about the way that people around you handle conflict? What do you notice about yourself and how you respond when someone does something that hurts you? Here's some of the words that come to my mind. It's words like blame and judgment and pain and anger. Here's something else that I notice. How rarely we talk directly to the people who have offended us, and how frequently we will talk about those people to anyone who will listen. And there's something else right there. I just said those people. We fall into this mentality of us versus them. At Holland Restorative Circles, we ask a very simple question when it comes to the conflict that is inevitable, which is, can we do better? Can we push past some of those first instincts to blame and judge, instead have direct conversations with the people who have hurt us? And then can we have the kind of conversation that opens up understanding so that people can take responsibility for themselves, and then together, maybe even creatively, find some ways to move forward? I said a moment ago the conflicts that are inevitable. I say that because conflict just happens. It is. We may think in some idealized world that conflict wouldn't exist, but in the real world, the one we all live in, conflict happens. You put two people together in a room and leave them for any length of time, and conflict will emerge. It may be a natural part of life, but very few of us have been given any skills or training in knowing how to respond. So at Holland Restorative Circles, my colleagues Ann McKnight and Lynn Stubbs and myself, we went looking for some resources. And we found the work of Dominic Barter. Dominic Barter developed Restorative Circles, which is one practice under that larger umbrella of restorative justice. And we began forming a community here in Holland that practiced this work, and then began using restorative circles and then teaching. And we try to share this with others so that you can make this work your own in the same way that we have. So this video is an introduction to some of the basic building blocks that put together form a restorative circle. The structure and format of a restorative circle is really pretty simple. It's simply a way to have a conversation that brings together the people who have said or done something with the people who have been directly impacted by that action, along with the community that has been impacted. I will show you in a few moments a single slide that gives the structure for a restorative circle. But before I do, I want to introduce some of the basic building blocks that together make a restorative circle. And the first of these is attention. Most of the time, our attention is flying in many different directions. Right now, you may be thinking to yourself, where is this woman making this video? Is that her home? I hear that clock on the wall right now, and it's ticking, and it's really annoying. What am I going to have for dinner? Our mind goes in many different places. So when we are introducing restorative circles to people, we like to do a meditation that invites people to focus their attention. We ask them to place their attention first on what they hear in the room. And we spend some time just listening. And then we shift our focus to our bodies, to different places in our bodies, and we take our time to move from place to place to place. Eventually, we begin to focus on our breath, and then finally on our heart. We ask people, what are you most longing for as you come to learn about this work? And people will begin to say things like peace in life, relationships that are stronger, meaningful work. Or if any of these other things are insecure, they may say, I'm longing for housing or food or shelter. It doesn't matter where we are, how many times we do this exercise, we hear the same things. The same list gets generated, no matter who is in the room, no matter what class or gender or race or education levels. We all want the same things. These are basic, universal human needs. Anything any person ever does is an attempt to meet those needs. Everything that anyone ever does, even the actions that are perplexing and seem wrong to us, is someone's effort to meet one of those universal needs. So the first building block is learning how to focus our attention. If you think of attention like a spotlight, it's often whirling around kind of randomly, like I named it before. What we want to do when we come into a restorative circle is to take a hold of that spotlight and shine it in a particular direction. We want to focus our attention on our listening. We have lots of ways that we listen to each other. Sometimes we listen for whether we agree with what is being said. Other times we are looking for connection. Someone might be telling us a story from their life, and we're thinking about the experiences we have had that are the same. Other times we might find ourselves in an argument with someone, so we're listening for the chinks in the position that is being presented to us. Other times people might be telling us about something that is wrong in their life, and we are just waiting for the chance to give them advice about how they can fix what is wrong. There's lots of ways that we listen. The second building block in restorative circles is learning how to listen for meaning. Whenever anyone is speaking in a restorative circle, I want to bring my full attention to what matters most to them. What are they saying that is most important in that moment? My suspicion is that underneath all the many things people might say in a restorative circle, what matters most to them is one of those human universal needs that we named a few moments before. And whenever we practice this kind of listening, we hear over and over again from people that it is pretty different from the ways that we typically listen. So the question will be posed in a restorative circle over and again. What is it that you hear that matters most to the person who just spoke? We want to bring our attention to listening for meaning. The building blocks I've shared so far can be used at any time and in any conversation. But when a conflict erupts, sometimes you can be helped by the support of a third party to help you really understand each other and find a way forward. A microcircle is a quick and easy way to address a conflict that comes up in the moment. In the following screen, you will see what a microcircle looks like. I want to use an example to demonstrate how a microcircle might go. Let's imagine that Anne works in an office and is angry when she sees the schedule that her manager Sally has just posted. Let's imagine that I work in that office as well, and that I step in to lead a microcircle with Anne and Sally. So I turn to Anne and I say, Anne, what is it that you want Sally to know? And Anne might say something like, Sally, I told you that I cannot work on Wednesday. I can't believe you never listen. As facilitator, I then turn to Sally and say, what did you hear that matters most to Anne? And Sally might say something like, I hear that Anne is complaining again and wants special treatment with the schedule. So as I turn to Anne and say, is that what you want understood? She most likely is going to say, no, that's not it. What I'm trying to tell you is that next Wednesday, I have to take my mother to the doctor, and she is not doing well, and I'm the only one who can take her. So I turn back to Sally and say, what do you hear now that matters most to Anne? And Sally might say something like, and I hear that you're really stressed and maybe a bit worried about what's going on with your mom and that you can't work next week. So as I turn back to Anne and say, is that what you want understood? I might see Anne take a deep sigh and her shoulders go down a bit as she says, yes, that's exactly it. Now I turn to Sally and I say, Sally, what do you want Anne to know? And Sally might say something like, Anne, I need you to know that scheduling is the biggest headache of my job. There are so many moving parts, it's like a jigsaw puzzle every week. So then I turn to Anne and say, what did you hear that matters most to Sally? And Anne might say something like, I hear that she's tired of all the complaining all the time. So I turn back to Sally and say, is that what you want understood? And Sally might say, yeah, it is. I am tired of the complaining. But there's a little bit more. I want you to understand that it is my responsibility to keep this office functioning. And it's a very complicated task. And I'm doing the very best I can. So now I turn back to Anne and say, what do you hear now that matters to Sally? And Anne might say something like, I hear how important it is to you that our office work well, and that you carry the weight of that on your shoulders, and that you're doing the best you can with all of our schedules. And I turn back to Sally and say, is that what you want understood? And she might have that similar kind of moment of relief when she says, yes, that's exactly it. Now I've just said this in a way that made it neat and tidy. Sometimes that dialogue loop will go multiple times. But once each person feels as if they've been heard to their satisfaction, then the facilitator can look to both of them and say, what needs to happen next? And that's when the free-flowing of brainstorming and suggestions and solutions can be generated by the people who've been in conflict with one another. This dialogue loop is the heart of a restorative circle. And you will see as I now put all these building blocks together how a restorative circle can work. Sometimes a conflict involves more than two people, or maybe because of the complexity of the situation or the emotions involved, it's helpful to call a full restorative circle. There are actually 3 conversations that occur around a restorative circle. On the next slide, you will see what each of these 3 conversations are called. They are a pre-circle, the circle itself, and a post-circle. Pre-circles provide an opportunity for a facilitator to meet with all of the parties to a conflict. In the initial pre-circle, the facilitator will speak with the person or the group who are calling the circle itself, and will discover what was said or done that the person wants to bring forward. Then the facilitator will describe how the dialogue will go during the circle itself, and then we'll ask that person or group who else needs to be there in order for the conflict to be resolved. And at the end of the conversation, the facilitator will find out if the person or group wants to move forward. The facilitator will then meet with all of the other people who have been named, and will have a very similar conversation. They too will hear about the process itself, will have an opportunity to name anyone else who needs to be present, and will decide whether they want to move forward and come into the circle. By the time that the circle itself occurs, everyone who is there understands how the dialogue will go and will have agreed to use this process for the conversation. In the next slide, you'll see what the structure of the circle itself looks like. There are 3 rounds of dialogue in a restorative circle, and in each round, every person will be asked the question for that round. The first round investigates how people are doing in the present moment, with the question, what would you like known and by whom? about how you are right now in relation to the event and its consequences. Anytime anyone speaks in a restorative circle, that feedback loop we talked about in the microcircle is used. So the facilitator will ask the group after someone has spoken, what did you hear that matters most to the speaker? And after someone offers up what they heard is most important, the facilitator turns back to the speaker and says, is that what you want understood? That feedback loop will go on as many times as is necessary until the speaker feels as if they have said everything they need to say and have been heard to their satisfaction. Once everyone has had a chance to answer that question, the dialogue moves to round number 2. And in the second round, we are investigating the past with the question, what would you like known and by whom? About what you were looking for at the moment you chose to act, or at the time of the event, or when you first heard about the event. Again, the feedback loop is used, so that every time someone speaks, they are sure that they have been heard to their satisfaction. Here's how I would describe the flow and movement of these first 2 rounds of dialogue. When someone is in pain, they need to feel as if they have been heard. They need to know that people understand why they are upset and why it matters to them. And it's only when they feel like this has happened that they can become interested or curious about what is going on with the others in the circle. And they begin naturally to ask questions then like, what were you thinking? And so the second round gives that opportunity for people to say something about what it was they were looking for when they chose to act or when they reacted. After those first 2 rounds of dialogue, which can take a significant amount of the circle time, the group becomes ready to move to the 3rd round. And this is where the question is asked, what needs to happen next? What would you like to offer? Or what would you like to request? At this point, the group moves into brainstorming mode, and they begin to think about some concrete actions that might allow the group to move forward. And at the end of that discussion, the facilitator will check that all of the actions brought forward are agreed to by everyone in the group, and will ask how much time is needed for people to live into those plans. And then we'll set a date for the post-circle. The post-circle is when the group gets back together. This can be a much briefer conversation, but it gives a chance for the group to say whether or not they are satisfied with what has happened. This is an important part of a restorative circle. It makes this process different than just having a venting session. It ensures that the group is checking in about how satisfied they are now that the action plan has been put into place. And they can determine that they are satisfied and ready to move on, or they can come up with a new plan. I hope this gives to you a feel for what a restorative circle is and why it might be useful to you. And at the very least, I hope that the building blocks could be helpful. When the next time comes up in your life that a conflict emerges, you might have a few new tools to respond in some different ways. I hope this has been helpful to you. If you want to learn more about training opportunities with Holland Restorative Circles, you can check out our website.